Next, we have the Fireside Chat 1, and the topic for same is strengthening controls to mitigate new white collar crime. For the same, I would like to call upon stage our moderator Bamini Viswanath. She is the Global General Counsel at TVS Supply Chain Solutions Limited. Please have a huge round of applause for her. Joining her on stage, we have our speakers Deepak Bansal, Vice President and Group Head Internal Audit at Somani Impresa Group. Please have a huge round of applause, everyone. Next, we have Sujat Bin Ali. He is the Global General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Resustainability Limited. Please have a huge round of applause, everyone. We have Mr. Rabindra Purohit, Head Legal, Compliance and Company Secretary at Nivea India. Please have a huge round of applause, everyone. We can start with the session. Thank you.
Good morning. A pleasure to be here and a warm welcome to my co-panelists. The earlier session was very, very interesting. And I think Nitin actually started off with the word what white-collar crime means. And pretty much I'm going to start with the same topic because when I looked into what was white-collar crime, when did it start getting used? This was actually in 1939 by one Edwin Sutherland. He actually talked on a topic called white-collar criminal, addressing to American Sociological Society. And he talked about what kind of crime this was. This was actually a crime, according to him, was committed by people who were in a position of respectability and trust. And this was a groundbreaking approach at that point of time because they were moving from a typical street-level crimes to a sophisticated or, at that point of time, a person who was in position of trust. Now, from then to now, of course, we heard the previous session talking about how much of advancement that's been made, right? Of course, there's so much of expansion. There's still this deception, manipulation, exploitation for financial gain still being there. But the scale has expanded. There's so much happening in terms of, we heard about insider trading, we heard about money laundering, cyber crimes. All these are happening, and it's just not only here. It's a globalized economy. It's across. I mean, I head an organization, the legal function, which has got presence in over 25 countries and about 65 subsidiaries. It's not an easy feat to manage that because in our globalized environment, we don't know where the fraud is happening and how it's happening. Of course, we heard a lot about the technology part, and I'm sure our co-panelists are going to be talking about this. The data privacy is something that, it's touching each one of us. I think Nirmal pointed out about how individuals are getting targeted. And I had a colleague, a senior level person whose daughter exactly, when Nirmal was talking about it, it sounded so close because he was actually talked about how his daughter was kept somewhere and he actually paid out about ₹1 lakh. A senior Big Four executive was frauded by money out in investment schemes. So these are happening all around us, and that's the world we are living in. Regulators, of course, they are coming up with various regulatory preventions. We do have cybersecurity measures, which each of our corporate companies, we do come up with it. But still, it is something that all of us need to deal with. So I'm going to actually turn to my panelists. In this kind of environment, Deepak, let me start with you. What's been your experience when it comes to controls? And that's our topic for the day, strengthening controls to mitigate the white-collar crime. So what's been your experience in dealing with this in your tenure?
So thanks, Bhamini. So I would like to talk today about some real-life situations, how we, identified red flags, how we tackled, how we put the controls around them. So I'll start with, if we all know about the fraud triangle, how it, is a kind of landscape where we say why a fraud happens. But in the fraud triangle, so I focus primarily on the opportunity part. So I've seen in my, experience that irrespective who the guy is, senior guy, junior guy, mid-level, how rich he is or how poor he is, what his salary is, they all look for opportunities in the system, vulnerabilities in the system. Wherever they find it, they will go for it. So now opportunities are, we in the first session we talk about what are those preventive things, deterrents that we put, and this has been happening for ages now with this 2I formula of SODs, proper policies, SOCs, automation, but still we found frauds are happening everywhere in all functions across organizations, across plants, in sales, supply chains. So now how we go about this? So first of all, when we talk about some platforms that what all we should have, what all kind of so defense fair, but what about the audit team who is going and reviewing those areas, reviewing those controls, transaction processes? Are they educated enough to tackle, to identify those kind of red flags? So what I personally do when I coach my team and I train my team is about the business knowledge. If they don't have the business knowledge, they don't know about the business models, supply chain, sales, financial aspects, risk. What is great that can actually go wrong if someone is more knowledgeable than the audit team. So in my trainings and all, so I focus primarily on how well trained my team is around the various aspects. So my group has 4 entities. Out of those, 2 are listed, 2 are unlisted. So we are more so concerned about the listed entities because there are more controls and more so kind of sanctions that can come to them on the valuation part. So few of them are B2B, few of them are B2C. Now, so when we go B2B, the business model is too simple. But when we go B2C, the model becomes more complicated. It is like more exposed to various stakeholders, dealers, distributors, supply chain partners. So so one of the recent audits on the supply chain. So what we did, so reviewing the freight rates, the CFA, the 3PL partner agreements. So everything was signed. It was like signed by, not by 2 eyes, but 4 eyes. 4 hands have signed those agreements. So if someone go literally will see everything is in place. What we are paying to the transporters on the route rates and all is all set. But when we go one level down, we saw that the rate agreements were so containing very fewer rates vis-a-vis what we were actually paying for. So what we identified that the supply chain head has actually given manual approvals over emails for certain routes for which the rates are very high. They were not even negotiated. There was no platform where they have gone for multiple quotes from different transporters to get the best rates. So ultimately, when we found out a big so kind of wrongdoing was happening by the supply chain head by doing a very small stint of the entire thing in an agreement, and rest is outside the contract. Similarly, when the auditor goes and reviews about the space that is required for storing our goods and material, the warehousing, everything seems good. There's an agreement, there's a lease agreement with the landlord, and we are having that space and we are doing in and out of the material. But have we ever seen that? Is that space, access or what we actually require? So what we did a study of about the size of the material that we have, the boxes we have, and how many materials or stock we are storing there. So when we did a study, we found almost like 10 to 15,000, or almost like 40% space was accessed, and that was actually having a nexus with the landlord that he was having, and the 3PL partner. So the access amount that is being paid is being shared between the supply chain head and the landlord and the 3PL. So my point is, when we do audit, from the traditional way of doing things, looking at the SOP, looking at the signature, looking at agreements, now we have to go beyond. When we go beyond into all these things, actually this is required or no, how the supply chain rates are negotiated. So now what we did after all this happened, we did an e-bidding platform. Now everything what is being have to paid. The accounts team will look at the e-bidding platform rates which are being finalized, and then only the payments happening. So I mean to say, apart from the traditional way of doing preventive measures of this SOPs, policies, automations and all, the audit team has to be like one step ahead and see that how these can be manipulated from the back end. So the opportunity, so my team will find for kind of opportunities where the person can actually take the advantage and can still do the fraudulent things. In one more instance, so what was observed that so we were seeing that when we have almost 20 plus warehouses, big warehouses across pan India for storing our goods and all. So when we're reviewing, we found that these all warehouses were being leased not directly but through the 3PL partners. In that attempt, what was happening? So there was a nexus between the landlord and the 3PL partner. The rent is, for example, 14 rupees per square feet. They were charging 18 rupees per square feet plus the management fees. So when we questioned why you are paying management fees on the rent is a fixed payment. Nothing you need to manage, it is once signed off for 5 years, it is for 5 years. But that was the modus operandi. That was the kind of gap that identified, and we were losing lakhs per warehouse every year because of all the nexus. Now recently, what we did, this has to be all directly leased by the company. So we saved 8%, 9% management fees that we're paying, and we better negotiated that end. So in all, what we did, we make a complete checklist of what all are the costs and who will be managing those costs so in case of the supply chain space. So that actually eliminated any kind of gap that the next supply chain head could explore and kind of do all these fraudulent things. Similarly, when it comes to your sales area, the project sales, what we call institutional sales, is one big gray area where there's a leeway of the major price discounts. So in that area also, so people we found were doing like fake POs. So they were generating fake POs of the big builder houses and try to get the material at a lower rate and then supplying it in the trade market. So what was the root cause was it was all manual. So it was all coming on the mails. No one was able to check. In the push of sales, we have to do a growth also. We have to show margins also. So in that thing, everything was accepted and supplied. But when we did this detailed review, that means going beyond what was seen on the papers, document, signature, we found that this is all being run as a racket by some of the salespeople. One more red flag that we identified is one area head is there at the same location for 15 years. Now that so raises a red flag for us that why the person is not moved, why he's not asking for the promotions, why he's satisfied with everything. The reason was that only because he's generating fake sales orders from the big institutions and getting the material at a lower rate and supplying in the market at a good margin. So these are red flags which we need to catch, which we need to carry, and then we see how the process is, make more straight, more transparent. And that is what I think we do when we do audit. So it's like slightly moving ahead of the traditional audit and going one step ahead and try to find out is there any kind of those black holes which exist or those vulnerabilities which exist which we can catch, correct? Now when we talk to my chairman, my promoter, and to the board, so they have the same question with me that how we make sure this is eliminated. I said, sir, this cannot be eliminated. Please don't have any expectation. We can minimize all these things, but we never can eliminate. It's like deploying our armies at the Kashmir border. So we can say we can minimize the terrorism, the incidents, but do you think that deploying army can eliminate? No, it cannot be. So we can be more vigilant. We can keep on putting more controls. It's a learning that we keep on happening. Once we, like someone in the first session told that, we learn from when the fraud happens, we learn. We are more educated. So that we keep on doing. So we are tightening the SOD things. So we have a tool now which takes care of the entire segregation of duty access control. Any new access control will be, so given once that tool approves, there is no conflict. So that kind of thing we keep on learning, we keep on implementing. But yes, the answer is fraud you can completely eliminate? No, it cannot be. Always. So we have to be on the run, we have to be on the go always and see that we are doing the right thing in terms of implementation.
Thank you, Deepak. Very interesting points that you brought out. And one thing that I really liked was about understanding the business, be it your team or the others. For them to know what the business is all about will definitely help them to detect the, the fraud there. And of course, going beyond the standard audit practices, right, which is where I think the difference clearly comes in. And obviously, audit is something that the stakeholders depend on. And that's what is something, if you're saying that we are looking at something going beyond, I think that's really good. So, Shujat, let me go to you next. I would like to understand a little more, and I'm sure the audience will also like to understand a little about your experience, of course, in terms of the controls and other mitigation measures you've put in, but also on the risk management, which we believe is a framework which sets the fundamentals in place for obviously, detecting and assessing. So let's hear from you a little more on that, please.
Sure. No, I think, a few, quick anecdotes and I think I'm audible. Yeah. I think one thing, we keep seeing there's a lot of surveys and all of that stuff. I mean, it's only increasing. This is always a question we keep, getting as Deepak was mentioning. The board's question or the management question is, what is that we can do to eliminate this? That is not going to happen. And if you simply see the kind of practices which are developed in big fours or the law firms, we never had a white collar practice. We never had a forensic practice, last 5 to 10 years back. But now you see the kind of a burgeoning increase right? And of course, all these survey reports and all the assessments and all, it keeps on talking about it's going to increase only. And of course, previous session also did cover the root causes. If you see, I think it's the fear or greed or pressure. Also, there is a new aspect of validation. I mean, I have been part of some of the investigations, and when we tried to dig down as to why some of these things happen, the answers were very interesting. They said, the top management does that, they are getting something, why should I not do that? And interestingly, they are linking it to the whole HR aspects. मेरे को promotion नहीं मिल रहा है, मेरे को increments नहीं मिल रहा है. These are some of the things what they are actually saying when they are getting caught. So I think from all these aspects, I think this is going to only increase, right? So when we look from a risk management standpoint, I mean, every organization work on a enterprise risk management approach, and I'm sure pretty much that in most of the organizations, most of the industries, I think as the way it is continuing, the fraud risk or anti-bribery risk or compliance related risk will definitely be form part of the top 10 risks. I mean, that's what I feel. And if you look at from that perspective, I think that's a starting approach. I mean, I'm sure a lot of companies may have some policies, controls and all, but if you think from a risk management standpoint, I think when we try to identify a particular risk, I think it's important to go back and check from each industry. I mean, from the previous examples, I mean, these days, whether you're talking about HR or a finance or supply chain or IT, no department is left, including CSR as well. I have seen CSR related frauds also happening very much. So there's no department which is untouched. I mean, you can keep finding all sorts of things. I have, of course, in my experience, I have seen even manpower related frauds as well. I mean, though organizations have a biometric systems as well, right? But at the end of the day, the physical deployment is not happening. I mean, the work which can be done by 10 people is being done by 5 people. I mean, those are the things also what we see. And one of the trends what I have also seen is with respect to people are getting more smarter. I mean, from a documentation standpoint, it's getting very, very difficult, largely because of the collusion. And if you see the trend of the whistleblowers, only when the coterie or the collusion breaks, then the information starts coming in, right? And similarly, mostly these things are also happening through a lot of a Benami approach. I have seen the situations wherein some of the procurement frauds are happening and all, and the benefits are not moving to a particular perpetrator. It is going through some other channels. And when we do investigations, I think it's getting very, very difficult to do tracing of assets standpoint. I mean, these are some of the things what I have seen in my experience. But coming back to the risk management, when we try to work on some of the controls, I think it is absolutely important to learn from the previous experiences, getting the inputs from the internal audits, getting inputs from the statutory audits, and more importantly, working with the departments and trying to, understand the business and process, what all can happen, right? I think that taking a fresh, perspective and a fresh approach will really help to, go and identify each department, what all can happen, right? And of course, the latest trends, I mean, where you talked about the deep fakes or the AI or the cyber and all those aspects. I think it's important to relook at the current policies and the current controls as well. And when we think from a risk management standpoint and come up with a very specific, risk identified under the fraud. Of course, there are types of frauds which are there, types of white collar crime which can happen, and what are the existing policies. And based on the inputs, what we got from the company, I think take a perspective and see, whether those policies are relevant or it has to be upgraded, controls has to be upgraded. I think that's, very, important. And again, each industry has a different, approach. And it's also good to have an outside-in perspective, as, some of our colleagues discussed. I mean, when we, possibly not on stage, and when we offline discuss, I mean, you can keep, getting variety of examples. Oh my God, this kind of things can happen. Then we can go back and see that process, whether it is working or not. So I think a lot of, outside in perspective, from an industry standpoint, from a consultant standpoint also can be taken. I think all of these can be, good inputs to, refresh the existing risk management framework, which of course includes the policies and the controls, and of course, working on the various mechanisms. While we have all those 3 lines of defense, I mean, reliance on the internal audit can be done. I mean, in our organization, we have a regular meeting with internal audit team, and a lot of notes exchange can happen in terms of what are the vulnerable areas and where is exactly, someone has to go. I mean, for example, a transaction audit is very useful. I mean, sometimes just broadly selecting transactions and going deep dive also will be helpful. Typically, it so happens that there are some small areas which no one touches, like staff welfare, some travel and all of those, so minor areas which are like very miscellaneous. But if you go deep dive there, you will find so many things. You've seen some situations, even the tax declarations or employee reimbursements and all. So I mean, there the materiality may be less, but I think if you go deep down there, I think it buds the culture as well. So I think a lot of these aspects are really important from an overall risk management standpoint. I have a point on the culture, but I'll see if I get the mic back.
Sure.
I'll share some
No,
specific
Shujat,
examples.
thank you. Thanks for this, because I think risk management framework for an organization is very, very important. It does set the fundamentals. But then let me also go to Rabi now. Rabi, I would like to understand a couple of things, maybe more in terms of controls compliances, and also how, and we've heard the previous session talk about the technology, right? How do you think technology is helping you in terms of preventing fraud? Because I think it's so advanced, we've heard enough and we know enough about it, but it'll be good to understand what is it that you are doing on the technology side.
Thank you. Today is a great day because it's International Yoga Day. So how many of us has done yoga today? How many of, okay, only few. But how many of you are going to do yoga today? Because it's still evening, you can do the yoga. How many of you are going to do yoga today? Okay. So why I'm asking yoga is because, yoga is ancient. Yeah, it's in our history culture. Yoga is very long time. But this fraud is also in very ancient days. The fraud was happening. In Mahabharata, Sakuni played the first fraud with Pandavas. He had that manipulated and he created something, and the fraud is created. So now the corporate world came in some 200 years ago, and now we are talking about the fraud because the technology came in, and we are saying that it's a new way of doing fraud. But it's not new. It's ancient, but only that the size, shape, color has changed. Okay. So lawyers always start with disclaimer. So I start with disclaimer that whatever I'm saying here is my professional independent opinion, nothing to do with my organization. They are not my organization view, but what I learned from my organizations that I will share with you here. So my journey is that I work with companies like those who have 50,000 crore turnover and 12,000 employees, and even the current group where I'm working, we are 20,000 employees, present in 160 countries worldwide, big operation. So in a big operation, like our headquarters in Germany guys don't know what business or how the business is conducted in 160 countries around the world, right? The span of control is so high, you cannot imagine that how the operation is happening. Like our headquarters here in Mumbai, we don't know how the operation in Chennai or Bangalore is happening, right? The transactions are numerous. How all these transactions are happening as per the compliance culture and policy, nobody can't imagine that, or nobody can't ensure that it's happening properly, right? So how these big corporations manage that? So there is a concept called duty to report. What is the duty to report? If you come across any fraud happening in your organization, the employees are duty bound to report. If they have identified this kind of fraud, financial fraud, competition law violations, and XYZ violations. If this kind of 4 or 5 frauds, if you come to your knowledge or if you suspect that it is happening, as per our code of conduct, you are bound to disclose. So it is one concept called duty to report. So that I think companies should follow this duty to report so that the employees know that where I should report if there is a fraud happening. There should be anonymous mail. So this connect with the whistleblower policy. So do we have a whistleblower policy, right? Now I'm digressing. Now I'm coming to the ma'am's question that have you heard of the concept blockchain technology? So blockchain technology, even Government of India is adopting for GST fraud. So for each transactions, the technology creates the record the blockchain is now adopting by the banks and all these things, the transactions created, right? Now we have SAP system. The SAP systems are so robust. Any unusual transactions, anything there, they will report. And then there is a control authority matrix, right? For each level, there should be a checker maker, and my panelists already said that the 4I principle or 2I principle, depending in your organization's size and scale of the transactions, right? So all these mechanisms, all these technologies are readily available. Please adopt that. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'll wait for the next.
Deepak, I know that you also had. Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
How we, so kind of manage, so kind of, early detect the frauds or if fraud is happening on the, so one technology or one tool that we use is on CCM, continuous control monitoring. So once we identify, the reasons or the root causes of why these fraud, or which are those critical transactions which could lead to ultimately kind of fraud or wrongdoing, so kind of leakages. So we used to put those kind of transaction on monitor, surveillance, so kind of surveillance, so that tool helps us, so we define the parameters. For example, if a truck requires 7 hours for in and out, it is so coming for taking the delivery of the final out product, and the total time required is 7 hours, okay? But if the truck is leaving before 7 hours, within 2 hours, 1 hour, or is taking 15 hours, 20 hours, okay? So that would be raised as a red flag depending on the configuration that has been done. So these kind of so couple of instances from each function, from sales, supply chain, from warehousing, from finance. So what we used to do, we used to put these kind of control measures in the tool, and that keeps on giving the reports to us. And if there are reports which are too very left and right, so we used to act immediately rather than waiting for the next audit to happen for the area and then take out those things. So maybe by that time a big financial fraud or leakage has already happened. So that CCM tool really helped us, and there's a person who is managing that tool so that nothing is going unnoticed. So as and when those blips are also coming, we catching those blips, reviewing them, and if it may happen it's a false so positive as well. There might be a technical issue in the truck, and that's the reason it took 10 hours. But that will be verified immediately, and then we are assured that okay, so nothing wrong is happening. But if there's no reason, then it has to be, and one such fraud we identified is on the sales made to the distributors which are going above the credit limit. Usually based on the relationships, at time we go and allow credit beyond the credit limits, but that has to be approval based on the lease strategies. So we get certain blips which are saying that the credit has been overexposed. So when we reviewed, we found almost like 4 or 5 these credits exposed and doesn't have the approval. And that ultimately turned out to be a fraud which was happening. So the person was allowing the dispatch without the proper approvals, and we caught and we recovered everything from timely. Otherwise it would have been too late. If we have got to know after 6 months or a year, it would have been so too late. So this CCM tool really helped us to mitigate those things.
Very, very true. I think both Rabi and Deepak talked a lot about it, because I think technology right now definitely is very instrumental in helping us, be it in terms of AI algorithms or real-time monitoring or preventive insights or data analytics, which is integrated. I think it definitely helps us, and we've come a long way. So Shujit, maybe the last question you do have about, I think, another 2-3 minutes.
Sure.
A little bit on the culture. I know the previous panel also talked about it, but I think it's very important for us to have one quick question to address
Sure.
that.
I think few points, one, I think if you know that, there is a reporting to the auditors and all of that stuff. So while organizations have all these policies, controls, whistleblower and all, there is already also a fear that, okay, if we do some of these things, there is a reporting requirement, and we all know that there is no materiality related aspect, and it gets reported in the auditors report and all. So how do, the company and the management, balance this aspect of, the culture around it? Because they have to be very clear in terms of an approach. While we give strong messages, and when it comes back to reporting, and that's one aspect. Two, I think in terms of whistleblower programs and all, I think it's absolutely important to demonstrate what is being happening. There is a lot of thought process in some of the employees, we don't know what's happening, right? It's important to see in a redacted version, regularly communicate to the employees, these are the certain things happened, this is the way how it is identified, this is the action taken. That's second. Third, I think in terms of training and all, I think it's absolutely important to touch the emotional chord. when we talk about the controls and compliance and the impact, show examples around the personal impact, career impact, use spiritual angle, the parenting angle, and really talk about why the integrity is important. You can always do integrity months, use art and do all sorts of things to impact. Rather than a tick the box training, the training and the messaging has to be really impactful. Only then I think some of these policies, controls and all will possibly work. Yeah.
Sure. No, I think, Shrutat, you sort of hit the nail on the head. It has to be a part of our DNA. Only then we will all be able to sort of own this and prevent this right at the beginning, right? So I think from what I started off from 1939 to where we are, we've come a long way. But one important factor is more awareness needs to be done, and I think that's something that all of us are very conscious of. Definitely corporate governance and whistleblower, we've been hearing the other panels speak, and of course we've also talked about it, which is very, very important in terms of having these measures in place. Technology advancement is definitely helping us in terms of security measures or any other protocols that we want to have in place. And of course there's a lot of international cooperation that's actually happening right now, which is also helping us to put in place certain mechanisms that's needed, be it in terms of your ESG. I mean, that's one of the key things that's coming in play right now, right? Sustainability is definitely playing a role. Of course, the regulators' role and the compliance measures that the organizations take is something that we have to give them credit, because there's a lot of effort that goes in beyond it, into it. And of course, lastly, as Shujat said, in terms of the culture, I think we all have to walk the talk if we want to be serious about prevention and detection of fraud. And of course, I think last panelist talked about also the deterrent factor, which is an important one. Thank you.